My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine from Willow Healing, and today I am here with Alan Muskett. So he is a mental wellbeing practitioner, an author, a coach, and a trainer, and he came to this late in his career after 30 years in a fast-moving goods, and then moving back from his own burnout. He has a desire to help others, and it gave him the impetus that he needed to go it alone and set up his own practice and business. And then he wrote the book, The Burnout Ladder, which we're going to learn a bit about today. So a big welcome to the show, Alan.
Hello, Catherine. It's nice to be here today with you.
So I'm very excited to unpack this. So
it sounds
I'm
exhausting, all those things that I am.
No, it's exciting. I'm the same.
Yeah.
It's funny because the last few guests I've had on, we've read out the bio and everyone's like, that's me. You got to own your identity, right?
Well, you do. I think I could probably do with shortening the title a bit, speaker, author, trainer, anyway.
Don't worry.
Let's be
mine's
all of them.
just as long. It's because we can be all of them. We're not just in one box anymore. We've right. suffered from the burnout and we're coming back the other side. I fully resonate. So tell us a bit about your burnout journey and what happened.
Well, I think as burnout journeys go, I don't think it was too dramatic in what happened to me, other than the symptoms I can really remember very well. So the very short background story was I was actually working in Canada at the time. So I'd emigrated to Canada for a while, with the company I was working with, taken on quite a senior role. And when I got into that senior role, I realized that I had a little bit of imposter syndrome. So I was a customer service director for a fast-moving consumer goods company, which is a kind of interface between the manufacturer, if you like, and also the retailer, so you're kind of like the supply chain interface. And I had this big team, and I suddenly thought, from years earlier, I'd looked up to the people that did that job and thought, I held them in awe. And then I thought, all of a sudden I was in this place that, oh my God, how can this be me? So I put myself under a lot of pressure. Nobody ever really did this to me. I put myself under a lot of pressure to be the best, most inspirational, most caring leader that there ever could have been. And so I ended up working way too much. And I remember it was one Monday morning, it was 2:00 in the morning. And I woke up bolt upright with my heart pounding. And I just knew immediately I was awake as if I was, I'd heard a burglar or something. And I knew then that was it for a night's sleep. And I got up about 3:30 and started working on my laptop. And I was preparing a presentation that I was due to give at 9:00 that next morning. I thought, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Anyway, it just became a pattern. And you get into that survival mode where what used to be the exception becomes the rule. That became my life. And then just exhaustion just overtook me. I don't think I really realized what was going on, nor did I ask anybody for help, nor did I really even tell anybody. So I made a huge amount of mistakes, all the things that I counsel other people not to do now. And anyway, I guess over the last 10 years since that happened, I've learned the ways to get out of that, and I've learned other things. And of course, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. I know that if I were to go back in time, knowing what I know now, I don't think that would happen to me again. But hey, that's the wisdom of age, isn't it, as well? So there you go. That's a brief history of it.
I can fully resonate with you, Alan, because that's what was happening to me running a company. And
Oh,
I was
yes.
waking up in the middle of the night and sending emails. And I say to people when people ask me about it, the delay send button on emails, the worst thing you can have for a person in burnout and hiding insomnia, because it can
Yes.
hide what you're actually going through. And the amount of
Yes.
emails that I would send at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and I used to say that I work 24/7 because it was like that, right? You wake up in the middle of the night and it consumes you. It's like all of a sudden your whole life is just surviving to get through this job and to get through, and for me, I got to the point of starting to have panic attacks and starting to have massive anxiety, and I was in adrenal fatigue. And my only saving grace was that I was seeing a naturopath every week, but I'd walk out with like this massive box of supplements to keep me going because I was in survival mode and it was keeping me at that level. And exactly like you said, you don't talk to anyone about it. I talked to my naturopath about it, which is why I was on so much stuff. But if I hadn't done that, I probably would have had more serious health ailments. And I found out later that if I kept going how I was going to end up in autoimmune because my body wasn't actually getting a chance to stop and to come back from the stress. So I fully, that's when you were saying the story, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's reading my bio because it was exactly like that. And then you just, exactly as you said, you look back in that moment and you think, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through all of this? And is it really worth the money? Is it really worth the status? Is it really worth the long-term pain? And like you said, yes, you can know better now and you could do differently now, but you actually would never go back to that because you're like, it wasn't serving me and it wouldn't serve me now.
No, although it's funny how you do lapse into those old habits again, though. So I find myself doing that. But I think when you've been through it once, and I think you'd be the same, is you do get to know the signs a little bit more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so so you can protect yourself, but there are these instinctive, I think, needs that we have. Let's face it. Why do we burn out? You know, I suppose I should answer that question, shouldn't I? Really, I was going.
Yes, you
It's
wrote the book about it.
yeah, exactly. So I wrote the book called The Burnout Ladder, which we'll talk about in a second, which talks about the causes, and I think a lot of them are just intrinsic need to be respected, to have status, this fear we have inside that we're going to fail, um, because we have this natural survival need. So this primitive need, which, as we all know, goes back to our, ancient ancestry, where we had this fight or flight mechanism, which was for real threats. And now we have these imaginary threats, aren't they? Which is, oh, I'm not good enough at being a customer service director. It's not a real threat to me, is it? But so we use that fight or flight response, which exhausts us. And so, and we end up doing things that we probably shouldn't do, which is work too long. And it's not just working for ourselves either. It's the people pleasing. So, because I think a lot of us do something because we want to be seen to be doing well by others. And I always think that's a huge point. And I ask a lot of questions to my clients who I coach about burnout is, who are you doing this for? At the end of the day, if you trace back what your activities are and how hard you work on something, is it because you want this, or is it because it's how you look, or you're doing it for somebody else's needs? Be careful of people pleasing, and perfectionism as well. The number one, so I do a questionnaire, and there are 60 questions in the questionnaire, which ascertains at which stage you are in burnout on the ladder. And I'll describe that again in a second. But the highest score that people come up with that they agree with most is their very high standards of themselves. That's the highest score amongst anything. So if you do have those very high standards and you are a perfectionist, then you've got to ask yourself, why are you a perfectionist? What are you doing it for? Why is it so necessary that you need to be in control, and why you need to be doing everything really well? Peel back the
Yeah,
onion and see what you find.
exactly. And there's so much in there that I was like, yeah, it's so true, because it's like, why were you running a company and a detriment to yourself? because I'm the breadwinner and I needed money for my family, you know? So it was, I'm doing it for my family. I'm doing it for my family. It doesn't matter that you're burning out because it's like, I'm doing it for my family. I'm doing it for my family. And it just keeps going on in your head, right? And that's a different form of people pleasing in itself. You're still doing it to please your family so that you have money and food. But the funny thing is when you actually step out of that, the money will come. Like it just comes. Like
Right.
you'll find a different way because you've stepped out of that mindset. And, you know, when you were saying as well that the biggest thing that comes up is what you think of yourself, it's that saying, you know, that you're your own worst critic, you know, like, and I live with two, my son and my husband. And I used to be like this too, but I'm a lot more chill now, I think, because I've come back from it. And I used to run this masterclass called Imperfectly Perfect because that's what I had to learn to be, right? But my husband, he'll do something like he's very good at painting and he'll paint this amazing picture. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And he's like, oh, I could do better. And I'm like, what? You know, like, you know, just, I was like, it's great, you know, but that's that mindset, right? Like you always have to do better. You always have to do better. You always have to do better. And often we forget to acknowledge our little wins and we forget to acknowledge all the steps we've had along the way. And then we miss out on those dopamine hits.
We do, don't we? And you're right. I suppose if you're the one painting the picture, you will see its flaws, which other people might
Yeah.
not see, and that's a really good metaphor for how we are in our lives, isn't it? We just see our flaws, and we measure the gap between us and perfection, rather than all the steps we've taken, all the things we've done right. So, absolutely agree with that.
So you have this burnout ladder. So I'm assuming you're
Yes.
climbing the ladder to burnout.
Yeah. So the idea behind it is, so it came from. I didn't really realize this at the time of my burnout because I think part of burnout is you just don't have the perspective. You can't stand back and look at it because you're in it. So the idea about the burnout ladder was that we go through stages of burnout and just like the rungs on a ladder. I suppose I was searching for a good metaphor that people could grasp onto. So, and I remember I Googled burnout and looked at different pieces, and there were this thing that said there are 15 stages of burnout, and I thought, well, that's too complicated for people to get their heads around. So I narrowed it down to six
Mm.
stages or rungs of burnout. The reason I chose the ladder is because we tend to climb ladders in life, don't we? We're social climbers. We have career ladders. We have property ladders. So my warning is that this is a ladder you don't want to be on, because the higher you go, you actually don't realize that the flames are, licking around the bottom of the ladder and starting to burn it down. So the higher you go, obviously, the more you're at risk. But I think that's just the concept. The important thing is knowing where you are in the stages. And there are six, and they go from, so what I start out with is something called ignition, which is, it's the very start. It's almost before you even start to make a change. So you might be making a decision about whether you want to go for a promotion or a new job, or somebody might be about to go on mat leave, or you're just picking up somebody else's work. It's before the rubber hits the road. And it's quite an interesting point because you'll have lots of excitement. You'll have lots of maybe trepidation and nervousness. Can I do this? But what tends to happen is we tend to go, yeah, I can do that. And then we sort of look at it with rose tinted spectacles a little bit and say, yeah, I want to go for this. And then you get into the next stage, which is called acceleration, which is when you start to really push. So you've started, the change has already happened, and you're working extra hours. You are putting the extra effort in, and it really feels like an adrenaline buzz. It's like a real surge of adrenaline. I think this is what traps us, because we tend to get those dopamine hits, as you say. It's like somebody will say, "Oh, you're doing great work," because you've put the extra effort in.
Yes. Yes,
And
I
oh, yes,
am.
well,
Yes, I
I
am.
must do that again to get my validation from my boss. I need to please my boss or whoever it is. So, and at this stage, you're full of energy. Okay. So you've still got those stress hormones that are giving you energy. But also at this stage, a little bit of negativity starts to creep in, because what you thought when you were alone and thinking through the change sometimes doesn't actually happen in reality. And people get in the way, and life gets in the way, and not everybody agrees with what you're trying to do. And then you get into the third rung, which is called neglect. And it's called neglect because you literally do start to neglect yourself and those around you so that you can keep going. So, so you're having to keep the pace going, even though it's a faster pace than you know you can sustain. You just keep going, and you're starting to miss key moments in life. It might be your kid's sports day, or just you might just be missing out on going on holiday or weekends away. Life is starting to pass by you, and yet you're now climbing this ladder, and you can't seem to get off at this stage. Then you go into the next rung called cynicism, which is when you really start to resent it. And all of a sudden you just think, I can't really keep this pace up. And then little things start to get to you because you're stressed all the time. You become more irritable. So you'll start to see emails pop into your inbox and you start to sneer at them and you start to resent what people are saying and their stupid ideas and all that kind of thing. So, and you start to lose your temper, and you start to lack a bit of care as well for yourself and for others, which is when you go into the disengage rung. So we're almost at the top now, almost at burnout. So we're on the fifth rung. And this is when we just start to pull away from caring about the job. We don't really want to do the job. We also disengage from life. So there's a big element here around social connections and how that is so important. And the more people I talk to, it's the most obvious thing is that we just have to talk to people. You know, when we realize we're in this, we just have to talk. But at this stage, we pull away from all of that and we just don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear what somebody has to say to us. And we feel like we can solve the problem on our own, which I don't really believe we can. Or we can, but it might take longer to do that. And then the final
Yeah.
one is embers. So it's like the embers of a fire, if you like. So, and this is when there's really nothing left. All the stress hormones are just they're not even firing anymore. And so we've not got a lot left to give. And this is equated with depression, really. You're not enjoying life. You don't have any get up and go. The things you used to enjoy, you don't enjoy anymore. And I think this is why it's so difficult to diagnose burnout or distinguish it from depression, because the two symptoms are very similar. And of course, people who have depression anyway may be more predisposed to burnout anyway. So it's a complicated equation, but they're the 6 rungs of the ladder that go up. And then against each one, there are various tools that I have to recognize what it is where it is you're at. So that's where the questionnaire comes in. So somebody will fill in a questionnaire, 60 questions, takes them 15 minutes. That comes to me, bang, a report comes out, and I'll be able to tell them where they are on the ladder. And usually by the time people have come to me, they're somewhere in the middle, because those first 2 stages of ignition and acceleration, they're so exciting and they're so enticing that they don't really realize what it is that's happening to them.
Yeah, and definitely when you
There
get
you
to
go.
number 3, that cynicism, and you're just
Yeah.
like, oh my good. And when you were saying the email thing, I'm like, oh my goodness, so many memories flashing back to me. And it's funny, because when I stepped out of that role of running a company, I still had the fear of checking my email inbox to see how many emails I had to deal with and how many things I would have to, look at it and go, really? Like, you're emailing me
Yeah.
about this? Or or I'd sit in a meeting and go, couldn't this be an email? I've heard other people say that too. Like, it's just really, it is like that when you get to that cynicism stage, and you start to stop seeing all the joy in life, and you start to stop being grateful for anything you have, really, because you just keep seeing the negative in everything. And then you end up in that scarcity victim mindset, which is really hard to get out of on your own. And what you said too about connection and the social connection, it's so important, because we're not meant to do this alone. That's why we're human. We can't actually see ourselves that close. We need someone from an outside perspective to actually say, hey, this is what's happening with you right now, and maybe you need to pull yourself out of that, or go talk to somebody, or go get some help.
This is true. And I think that's the conundrum, really, is that when I put in the book, it seems obvious. You just need to go and talk to somebody when you get to that cynicism, disengage stage. But that's exactly what you don't want to do because you just don't
Exactly.
want
I
to
don't want
hear
to talk
it.
about it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's and there's a bit of denial in there as well. I think it's not happening to me, and I don't need help. Thank you. I'll be all right. But yeah, fortunately, I think more people are waking up to it now, and I guess the atmosphere around mental health has changed in the 10 years since that happened to me, and so yeah, you're more encouraged to open up about it, which is good.
Yeah, and I guess there's all the new studies coming out because my coach was talking about this with us, and entrepreneurs are less likely to go into burnout than actual people running companies and CEOs and things like that. And it's interesting because entrepreneurs are more likely to, create a business to support them and what's their passion and what's their purpose. Whereas if, like you said, CEO, they're going up for that promotion and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, but then they're responsible for this company that's not even theirs, and they have to run everything around them, and then they have all that people pleasing that kind of kicks in, right? And then they're in this constant state of, I have to do this and I have to do this, I have to prove myself, I have to prove myself, I have to prove myself. So it makes more sense why they would end up in burnout than an entrepreneur who is starting their company. Say that I still started my own company, but I ended up in burnout. But now I can look back and say, yeah, I created this environment where I made everyone depend on me, and I had to people pleasing again. Whereas if I made it so that everyone was taking your active role and risen up, it would have been less pressure on me and I wouldn't have been in that burnout role. But again, that's the gift of hindsight, right?
It is the gift of hindsight, and it also because what we tend to do is try and predict what other people are going to think about us, and that they think a lot less of us than we think they do. And you know what I mean? They think less about us than we think that. So if we had just let something go and said, "Well, I'm not going to go that extra mile that I don't have to," that probably wouldn't have minded. But we made the story that they do. So you know.
Exactly. And it does feel like that too. It's just like, oh, why did I do that?
Yeah, I look back now and I cringe really at some of it, and but it still happens. I mean, when I was writing the book at the very end stages when I was doing the edits, so I got the book back from the editor, and I was checking the edits, and I was working again. I was working 3 o'clock in the morning through till 9, 10 the following night, and I suddenly got the feelings in my body of what that felt like, and that kind of rising stress and pressure in my head, all to a self-imposed deadline, by the way. It was my own publishing deadline, nobody else's. But I felt that cynicism kick in because I was starting to read what I'd written. And I hope nobody else feels this when they do read it. But I just thought, oh no, that's awful, that nobody's going to want. I was taking huge paragraphs, chunks of it out, thinking that's worthless. So I had this lack of confidence in myself, and it was just but I knew what was happening, and that's the difference. I could feel it happening, and thought, well, hang on, no, just step back a second. What's the reality going on here?
Yeah. And I can fully relate with that because I wrote a book and I was like, yeah, I'm going to submit it to a publisher and just see what happens. And it was the day I had to submit it and that I set self-imposed deadline. But the book was done. I'd done editing and the book was done. And all I had to do was write a synopsis and a biography. That's all I had to do. I had the biggest self-sabotage, self-doubt moment. I just was like, what? Like, this is like, what am I doing? Same thing as you went through, Alan. And I was just like, what is it? And my husband had to pull me out of it. He's just like, you've done everything. Just finish it. Like you're so close to being done. Like just do it. And you had to pull yourself back. And then now it's like 5 months on. And this week I've had this to-do list, which is immense. And I could feel that overwhelm, that old feeling coming up. And I just went, no, just do the next thing. Just do the next thing. Just do the next thing. And I came home yesterday and I had a really incredibly busy day at my day job. And I somehow managed to get so much stuff done in the midst of all that. Like even driving, I was like, I'm just going to do voice to text, and it can write a note and I can edit it later. Like just get this stuff done. And my husband's like, how did you do all that today and all of that and you're still here? And I'm like, I don't know, but I really need to go to bed now. Whereas the old me would have just kept staying up till midnight and kept pushing, pushing, pushing. Whereas,
Right.
like you said, you start to recognize your patterns and you pull yourself back from them, because otherwise you do, then you'll fall back into the old habit, and then you'll fall, because that's what your body knows how to do. And then it will just get stuck in there. And instead, that's where your mindset coaching comes in, right? And it's like, how do I pull myself back from there and stop from getting that far in?
Yeah, and I think it is that check-in process. So I was talking to a guy the other day who had been coaching on burnout, and he, one of his secrets to prevent him from going back is constant checking in with himself. And it's like, how are you today? So, and at a certain point in the day, if you ask yourself that and say, well, where am I? Because before you might not have bothered asking, you just keep going. And yet he would ask somebody in his team, how are they doing? You know, and saying, well, you really should knock off now if you're getting tired. It's remembering to be kind to yourself is the hardest thing.
It is, and it's that self-compassion, right? And that remembering that you're human and that you have to
Yeah.
actually sleep and eat at some point. Definitely sleep, you know, and you
Well, yeah,
can't
both
sustain your
hopefully.
life on coffee. Yeah, exactly. We can
No, you do.
fast, that's okay, but there's a difference between an intentional fast versus I'm stressed and not looking after myself fast, right?
That's it. Well, yeah, if it's intentional, fine. But so I think I'm in the themes around how do you get out of this. We've talked a bit about I guess the causes, but for me, the one of the main things is mindfulness, and I guess that self awareness, that self compassion, that self check in is very central for me. So, and from that comes a better mindset and a healthier mindset, that kind of growth mindset, which is, I'm not aiming for perfection, but I'm aiming to get better, and that's fine. Um, and then being able to, handle your emotions as well, and understanding that you are going to have your bad days in any job, anything you're doing, you are going to have your bad days, and you are going to react as well. You're going to react to those emails sometimes, but then having that little bit of kindness for yourself, that is a human thing that you do. But then learning to train yourself so that you don't react so much next time, that you respond rather than react. And then a lot of it is managing stress. We talked about sleep. If we don't sleep, we will continue
Mm.
to produce adrenaline to keep us going through the next day, and then the coffee, and then we get into that cycle, don't we? But just managing the cortisol levels, using mindfulness, using exercise, and of course having a good diet as well. They're cornerstones, aren't they? Mind, body, and spirit. And then I think there's a big thing around relationships as well, which is really coming through from people I've talked to. Their way out was to start talking to people, and it was the continued path to get out is to keep talking and don't stop. And that's the main thing.
Yeah.
And then you realize, as you do open up to others, they say, "Oh my God, I'm going through the same thing." You
Yeah,
think you're
because like
alone,
attracts
and you're
like,
actually
right?
not. It does. It does. And we're all the same. I mean, everybody thinks they're kind of special in some way, don't they? That it's my mind that's racing all the time. I'm an overthinker. I have this problem. Well, we're all human with the same hardware and software.
Exactly. And it just depends on, your experiences, your beliefs, your culture, all the external things into how you
Yeah.
manage that and how you look after your body. And I really like that reminder too, that you need to actually think about your body, your mind, and your spirit, because, you can do all the right things and still be in a position, that isn't fulfilling you, and it's not filling up your soul cup and your spirit, and you're going to end up in burnout in a different way, because you're just going to end up numbing yourself, and then you end up with addictive behaviors because then you're actually numbing yourself from the fact that you're actually not lighting up when you don't want to get out of bed because there's no purpose. There's no reason to. It's just the same old, same old.
Yeah. I think that's quite right. And we do lapse into addictive behaviors. And I think it's also important that to watch out for that thing I mentioned before about this validation as well, that you get sucked in by the dopamine hit of somebody saying, "Oh yeah, you've done a great job there. Keep going. Keep that. This is really good." And of course, they would say that because you've solved a problem for them, and you've done something really good. And and I think that's very addictive. And I think there's something that we hide behind as well. I remember getting a
Mm.
laptop out at sort of 9 o'clock at night and feeling some kind of self justification that I was working hard. That even if I wasn't delivering the results, at least I was trying. And I felt some kind of bizarre, twisted, good feel good out of that. That I was at least trying hard, wasn't I?
Self-sacrifice.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're in the
exactly. That
martyr.
self
I'm being the
sabotage.
martyr. Yeah,
Yes, look at me.
I'm being the martyr. Yeah, look at me depriving all my sleep and my like draining all my adrenals and I like look and then we get stuck in that victim story too, right? Like, oh, I work so hard and it was I remember years ago a friend always said, "Oh, how are you?" And I said, "I'm being really busy." And she's like, "You always tell me that." And I was like, oh, maybe I need to think of a different response to this, or maybe I actually need to think about what that actually means because it was just that reflection back that made me pull up and go, why am I so busy? And why am I choosing? And you default back and you want to go back to that old mode. And it's about, being conscious of those behaviors that you can get back addicted into, exactly, that you can get addicted back into and pull them back into whatever. And then also, those behaviors that you use to avoid things, so especially now we've got phones, how often you can get
Mm,
sucked into your phones and social media and
yeah,
things like that to keep numbing you. And so you don't have to talk about things.
agreed. I mean, there are traps for sure. That thing about it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day when somebody asks you how you doing, and we do very often say, "Oh yeah, good, busy, busy, yeah, good," and is that the right answer? Yeah, we probably should be saying, "Oh, good, I'm healthy," and then you say whether you're busy or not busy. But there's also a stigma to being not busy, and when you're self-employed as an entrepreneur, and you've run your own
Mhm.
company, if you tell somebody you're not busy, they go, "Oh, really? you know, what's going
Oh,
wrong then?"
business is bad?
Yeah, exactly. People don't want to see you anymore, or what? And but actually, I think if you're busy enough, I'm not too busy. Is probably a pretty healthy and good response. You know,
Yeah, it's funny because I talked about this with my coaching group and I said, if someone says, how are you? And you say, I'm good, when inside you're actually quietly dying, you're actually dishonoring your own word and you're actually breaking your
yeah,
self trust with yourself. And I interviewed this person, Pete from Pete vs. Anxiety. He has a podcast. Anyway, and he doesn't ask people how they are. He says, how is your mental health today? Because that is a far more powerful question than asking how someone is, because we're so defaulted to just saying, I'm good. But I actually give people, I'm like, oh, I'm okay. There's just a lot happening with my family or something at the moment. And then a lot of people don't know how to respond to that because it's like, oh, this isn't the standard response. I don't know what to do with it.
it's like cannot compute, isn't it? That's not. People want to say, "Here, I'm good," so you can then move on and talk about other things. But I think that's a great idea. How are you mentally? It's a
Mm,
brave question,
ex-
actually, because people don't want to talk about it a lot of the time. But
yeah,
if we do learn to use that language, we'll open up more.
exactly. Exactly. And like from a mindset perspective, like where you've been working from with all your clients, Alan, it's such a powerful question because sometimes it's just enough to cause that inner reflection, right? And going, oh, how is my mental health? And it might be enough to come back down that ladder a bit more before they get to the embers, and come back down so that they actually don't get to that. The ladder's fully on fire and they can't come back because often just having someone see you and what's going on for you can be really powerful.
It is, yeah. I've got another client who was just told by his wife that she thought he was burning out, but she'd waited a little bit because she wasn't sure whether she could open up,
Say it.
even though they're married, to say that in that way, as if it might even come across as a criticism. So his takeaway was, I should open up to other people to let them tell me how I am.
Yeah.
There was one time I was talking to a friend of mine about a year or so ago, and he said, "How are you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, I'm really happy." And he said, "We were all worried about you about a few years ago." And this was going back about 5 or 6 years. I was doing a job back in this country, in the UK, and I knew I was on the verge of burnout then as well because of all the traveling I was doing. And he said, "We were all worried about you." And I was thinking, well, so there must have been conversations taking place, and I wonder why nobody told me, but maybe I hadn't given them permission to.
Yeah, exactly.
You
And
know,
it takes courage, really. It takes courage to be that vulnerable to open up with people, but also to be vulnerable enough to be open to people feeding back to you too, because it is that reciprocal relationship. And it you need to be brave, you need to be courageous, and you need to be open to go, all right, what do I actually need to do to change this? Because if you're not problem aware, that's the first thing, right? You have to be problem aware somehow, whether someone tells you or you just have an inkling. And then you need to be solution seeking, because a lot of people can be problem aware and then don't actually want to go find a way to change that. They rather just stay there. So that takes courage and bravery to actually move to that next step.
it does, and it will get better the more people open up. I think there'll be like a kind of critical mass, as more people start to make it, a normal part of conversing.
Exactly. And that they're more open to talk about it as well.
That's
So,
right.
yeah. And as we start to finish up our time together, Alan, if you could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a really good question. I think, given everything that's going on at the moment, and who knows by the time this goes out what will be happening in the political world, but um, I, 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 I just think we need to stop listening to what's being fed to us in the
Mm-hmm.
media and go and find out for ourselves what's really going on in the world, because we tend to get headlines and people get frightened of, and this is why, I don't know, without going too political, certain parties are growing in the world. And I think a lot of it is based on fear and a lack of understanding and ignorance. So if
Yeah.
people are encouraged to actually go and find out what's really happening and not just listen to headlines and click on clickbait, I think we'll be in a lot better place.
Yeah. And ask questions. Be curious.
Yeah,
Ask questions. Why is that
yeah.
so? And it circles back to even burnout. Why am I in burnout? What is going on? Why am I feeling this way? Ask questions.
And it's the inquiry of yourself as much as what's around you as well. So,
Exactly.
yeah, that's a good question. That made me think.
That's right. That's right. And how can people find you, Alan, if they want to get your book or they want to come work with you, if they feel they're in burnout or just have questions about burnout?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook mainly. I do a little bit on Instagram. I mainly tailor towards a corporate market for burnout. So you'll find me on LinkedIn. I've also got a business called Right Mindfulness. So you'd find me on rightmindfulness.co.uk. Right Mindfulness is all one word. And you could find the Burnout Ladder. There it is on Amazon. And it's available in paperback and in Kindle version as well. So there you are. And it's available,
Perfect.
I think, worldwide.
I should hope so if it's
Only
on
in English at
Amazon.
the moment. Only in English at the moment, but working on that.
It'll happen. It'll happen.
Yeah,
All
it will.
right.
But
Just don't
thank
burn
you.
out doing it.
No, never again.
Well, thank you, Alan. This has been a delight, and thank you so much for sharing your journey and the book that you've created, and that concept of the burning ladder and how to actually start to be curious about burnout. If anyone's listening and you think, oh, this is me, go talk to somebody.
Oh, yeah. The first thing you should do. Thank you, Catherine. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you having me on. It's been great to talk about this with you. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.